Hey everyone, one of the reasons why we've been able to succeed so well as a species is our ability to invent and develop new technology to improve our lives. Never has this been so true as in the modern age, where it seems things that were once unimaginable are being revealed on a regular basis. There are some truly astonishing things that are currently in development and have the potential to affect our lives for the better. From AIs that help with everyday tasks to new forms of energy, communication, and ways to clean our planet. It's time to take an in-depth look at 15 emerging technologies that will change the world. Number 15. GPT-3. Tech companies around the world are in a race to develop the first full artificial intelligence, but there are steps along the way that are arguably going to be far more impactful on the technology around us and how we live our lives. One of these concepts is the idea of deep learning, whereby computer algorithms can analyze past behavior and automatically find solutions to improve future performance. And one of the most interesting forms of this is called GPT-3. Developed by OpenAI, it's the third generation of a language prediction model, and the idea is that based on learning by itself, it's able to write text in the same way that a human does. It's one of the most difficult types of human imitation, and this latest attempt is almost unbelievable. Described recently as being one of the most interesting and important AI systems ever produced, GPT-3 will further blur the lines of reality, and you may well find yourself reading news articles or even novels that haven't had any human involvement whatsoever. You're probably familiar with the recent release of ChatGPT that showcased this technology to the world, and it's already being incorporated into Microsoft's products like Teams and Bing, where it will automatically schedule appointments, take detailed notes, and be able to provide you with a custom and relevant response to your questions. With Google and others hot on their heels, the next year or so will see the world truly change with the introduction of AI technology in ways we can't even imagine yet. Number 14. Satellite constellations. As the cost of launching satellites into orbit reduces, and with the improvement in component design and the potential uses of space technology, a number of big tech companies are now exploring the feasibility of creating their own satellite constellations. The idea of a network of satellites to perform a role isn't exactly new. After all, there are already 6 different navigational satellite constellations, like GPS, and a number of one-way and two-way communication satellite constellations, but these have traditionally only used a few dozen nodes to operate. Recently, SpaceX has been creating a constellation of its own called Starlink, which will, when it's complete, provide internet access across most of the planet. Amazingly, this involves positioning as many as 12,000 satellites in orbit to give optimal coverage, and while the company may be paving the way, it's not the only organization looking at doing this. Boeing, OneWeb, and Amazon are also looking to develop their own constellations to provide internet access, and this might be just scratching the surface of what they can be used for. If you look up when it's dark, you might just be able to see some of these satellites already, and if progress continues at the current rate, the night sky may soon be full of them. Number 13. 3D printing. 3D printing has had a varied history since it first started being used in the 1980s, and even until recently, it's only been useful for very specific tasks. Essentially feeding liquid material into a chamber and by applying layer upon layer being able to create a 3D object. It's a technique that's mostly been known for creating small plastic objects or replacement components for certain devices. As our understanding of materials has improved, though, 3D printers are increasingly being able to make objects out of different substances and are becoming seen as potentially the future of manufacturing. From clothing and food to medical devices and the ability to rapidly prototype new designs, the possibilities are endless. But perhaps the most exciting area is how it will change large projects. There are already a number of buildings from around the world that have been built by 3D printed parts, and this is going to become even more common. Instead of needing to ship in all the different types of bricks and other parts needed to build a house, all that's needed is a supply of basic material and a printer, and everything can be manufactured on site. It'll reduce transport needs, waste, and increase efficiency, and could mean new homes can be built in a fraction of the time they currently take. Number 12. Lithium metal battery. There's a focus right now on moving away from energy that produces emissions, and one of the best ways to do this is converting everything we use to run on electricity, as long as the electricity comes from green sources, that is. Major strides have been made in this in the past couple of decades, but one of the biggest limiting factors is the capability of batteries. Currently, the most reliable and cost-effective design that's used is a lithium-ion battery, but these have limits with how much they can charge and how quickly this can be done. as well as some concerns about their safety if they're damaged. A company called QuantumScape is, however, developing an alternative, which instead of having liquid parts like a lithium-ion battery is solid, known as a lithium metal battery. The results from the company's early tests have suggested that these could eventually increase the range of an electric vehicle by as much as 80% and can be recharged in just a fraction of the time. Right now, the prototypes are too large to be fitted to cars, but they're expected to become much smaller in the coming years, so much so that QuantumScape has already signed an agreement with Volkswagen to start selling EVs with the new batteries from 2025. Number 11. Zero-knowledge proof. We are relying on the online world more than anyone had ever anticipated when the first connected networks were created, and this has moved on far beyond merely sharing information. Currencies now exist purely within cyberspace in the form of cryptocurrencies, and digital products are now trading hands in similar ways through the use of NFTs. The technology that underpins their existence is complex and is based on the blockchain. But while users are able to remain anonymous and it's all supposedly decentralized, there still remains an inherent risk with the use of these. One idea that's already part of some newly designed cryptocurrencies and will have plenty of other applications is that of zero-knowledge proof. This is, in effect, the ability to prove knowledge or ownership of something to a second party without actually having to reveal the information itself. It's sort of similar to proving to a potential landlord that you can afford the rent, but don't want to reveal information about your bank details, or in this case, the wallet address of where you store your crypto, something that could make it a target for thieves. By adding extra security like this into the system, online currencies will get closer to being adopted by many more people than have already. And instead of being mainly speculative market trading, they can become commonly used payment methods. Number 10. Edge computing. The way we use computers has changed significantly in the past few decades, and so has the way technology is designed to give us the best service. At first, everything was done on a singular device in our homes, and now we mainly use cloud computing, whereby most activities from our emails to documents and virtually everything else is held online. And our devices are essentially just windows that grant us access to this. The problem with cloud computing, however, is that most companies rely on the infrastructure of just a few cloud providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and IBM, with Amazon alone accounting for 47% of the market. Quite simply, everything that can be moved onto the cloud has pretty much done so already, and there's very little room to grow in that space. So others have been looking at the so-called edge of the cloud. What this really means is that they're exploring ways to bring the processing and storage of the cloud geographically closer to where the user is in order to improve the experience. Rather than just relying on a few data centers, it will see more work done locally, and the idea is that it will significantly reduce latency, will also improve privacy and security, and will help reduce the bandwidth being used so the infrastructure doesn't buckle under the pressure of increased usage. In many ways, it may seem as if it's going back on the idea of cloud computing, but it's really harnessing it to a fuller effect. If fingerprint or facial authorization is dealt with directly by your smartphone rather than waiting for a server to reply, you'll be able to access your online content much easier. Similarly, self-driving cars are currently the best example of edge computing. Rather than waiting for a server's response, it can function independently, but at the same time, it needs to be centrally controlled so it's automatically updated and so the algorithms can be improved. Number 9. Cultured meat. More than 80% of farmland worldwide is used for meat and dairy production, and it creates huge amounts of pollution that add to the current crisis of global warming. Our obsession with meat is to such a large degree that it's estimated that 86% of all land mammals are either humans or livestock, something that surely can't be sustainable. One solution to this is to give up eating meat altogether, and this could reduce farmland usage by as much as 75%. While veganism is definitely on the rise, not everyone's ready to give up eating meat just yet, and there might be an alternative. Called cultured meat. Rather than coming from animals on a farm, it's grown in a lab. Researchers around the world are perfecting the technique right now, and it will be on supermarket shelves very soon. Tissue is taken from a living animal, and the stem cells are extracted. These are placed in a bioreactor where they're grown into muscle fibers and then can be formed into larger pieces of meat. It's a complicated process, though, and thousands of fibers are needed to make one piece of bacon. The first lab-grown burger was created in 2013 by a team in the Netherlands at a cost of more than $250,000. but recently an Israeli team managed to make a steak for about $50 a strip. As costs and quality improve, cultured meat will become far more economically viable and could be served in restaurants very soon. If you're not convinced, though, you're not alone. Surveys have shown that 20% of people would happily eat cultured meat, while 40% wouldn't. Still, even a fifth of people changing their habits would make a major difference, and it could lead to a wider change in perception. Number 8. Floating farms. Larger areas of land around the world are now dedicated to farming than ever before, and this is causing two main issues. The first is that it's destroying natural ecosystems, and the second is that it's producing the food far away from where it's actually needed, so it involves large transportation networks that create pollution and congestion. A recent trial in Rotterdam in the Netherlands is showing that this doesn't have to be the way, and by using space that's otherwise left untouched on rivers or potentially oceans, technology is now allowing farmers to create produce directly within the market where it will be sold. These floating farms can be adapted to the precise local needs. The trial in Rotterdam was a floating platform designed to accommodate a herd of 32 cows, for example, and is secured in place by concrete pontoons that were driven into the seabed. The entire structure rises and falls with the tide, and robots are used to provide food to the animals and remove all waste products. Other versions could be used for alternative animals such as sheep or goats, and there are already floating farms in various places dedicated to growing crops too. In the future, instead of clearing large forests for new farms, floating versions could well become a viable alternative. Number 7. Panacea. Military service members are exposed to some of the most extreme environments, whether it be hiking across large distances, flying at great heights, or diving deep into the ocean. This puts unique stresses on their bodies, and DARPA is trying to develop a range of pharmacological solutions to help them do this in a more safe and efficient way. Panacea aims to understand the complex range of proteins that exists in our cells and create drugs that can target multiple things at once. At first, this means gaining a greater understanding of the proteins that can be targeted. Currently, all of the drugs approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration target about 549 proteins, but there are more than 6 million different variants. Most drugs single out specific proteins, mainly because this reduces side effects and increases the speed at which they can be developed. If Panacea is successful, though, new ones can be developed that target multiple proteins in a multi-targeted approach that could be far more effective. While the intent is to develop these for military uses, greater understanding will undoubtedly lead to advancements and treatments for civilians too, and could open up a whole new branch of medicine. Number 6. Graphene. Industries, they're constantly looking for new materials to offer stronger and more reliable performance, but the next game-changing development is expected to be graphene. It's a substance that's long been theorized to exist, but has proven to be so complicated to manufacture that it's taken until now to become feasible. As the name suggests, it's derived from graphite, which is the material you'll be familiar with that's used in pencils. It's made entirely from carbon atoms. Graphite is a three-dimensional structure, but the exciting thing about graphene is that it's two-dimensional. What this means is that the carbon is arranged perfectly in a hexagonal honeycomb formation that's only 0.3 nanometers thick, and there's just 0.1 nanometers between each of the atoms. In practice, this new arrangement offers huge benefits that are only just starting to be fully understood. Graphene can conduct electricity far more efficient than copper, for example. It's also 200 times stronger than steel, but 6 times lighter. It's almost completely transparent because it absorbs only 2% of light, and it's impermeable to gases, even the lightest ones. And it can have chemical components added to the surface to alter its properties. Researchers see graphene more as a platform that developers will be able to arrange in a way that plays to their needs. It could, for example, revolutionize touchscreen technologies, be incorporated to make lighter composite materials, and has a number of uses in electronics too. The possibilities with graphene are truly endless, and it's expected to be possible to produce it in commercial quantities within the next decade. Number 5. Spin launch. The ability to put satellites in Earth's orbit has vastly improved the capabilities of a wider range of industries, from communication companies to transport and logistics, but there are far more who could benefit if it wasn't for the extreme cost involved in launching them. The devices themselves can be hugely expensive, but the biggest element in the price is having to hire space on a rocket and the vast volumes of fuel that are needed to lift them through the atmosphere. There could soon be an alternative to this approach, though. A company based in Long Beach, California called Spin Launch has re-envisioned how to propel an object into space, and the solution uses far less rocket fuel than a traditional launch. To do this, they're building a mass accelerator, which is essentially a vacuum-sealed centrifuge. This machine will be able to spin the rocket extremely quickly before releasing it towards the sky at speeds of up to 5,000 miles per hour. Once the rocket has reached an altitude of 200,000 feet, smaller rockets will ignite to help it reach an orbital velocity of 17,500 miles per hour. And by doing this, the cost of a launch is expected to be reduced by a factor of 20 and will be possible for a price of around $500,000. It's not without its challenges, though. The projectile will be exerted to a force of around 10,000 Gs during the launch, which means that any components being sent to space will need to be designed to withstand that pressure. And it certainly means that this won't ever be a viable option for sending humans beyond our atmosphere with this. Number 4. Brain-computer interface. Computers, they've undoubtedly changed the world beyond recognition, but a recent invention has the potential to begin a whole new computing revolution. We see computers in every part of our lives, from smartphones in our pockets to the ones that control all the systems in our home and beyond. But the limitations with how we interact with all our technologies still remain. Things have moved on from pieces of tape or a mouse, with touchscreens becoming the norm, but things are about to change with the race to develop a brain-computer interface, or BCI for short. As the name would suggest, this is a method to control computers with your thoughts, and the ability would revolutionize our lives. Not only will it shorten the time between you wanting something to happen and it taking place, but it'll enable computers to become an even greater part of our lives. Developing a functional BCI is incredibly challenging, however. The brain emits huge amounts of electrical signals, some of which can be very subtle, so the job of separating relevant ones from the background noise is very complicated. The first prototypes that were designed to do this required being implanted into the user, but the latest generation of devices are wearable, which makes them far more likely to be adopted on a mass scale. One in particular, called the Brain Talker, has been developed in China, and it's a small chip that can be worn, while Elon Musk's company Neuralink and all the other major tech companies are working on versions of their own. Not only will this change the world by giving everyone an easier and more efficient way to interact with the devices we use, but there's a range of other benefits too. Those with electronic prosthetics, for example, will be able to move them simply by thinking. And once this technology is out there, I think we'll never believe how we ever lived without it. Number 3. GPS-3. First beginning in 1973 and completed in 1993, the American GPS satellite network was the first global navigation system and revolutionized the way everyone determines where they are on Earth. At first, the benefits were envisioned for militaries, but the technology has now had an impact on all our lives, from the way certain electronics work to sat-nav systems and location-based tracking. The problem with GPS, though, is that the original 24 satellites, along with further ones that were subsequently added, don't provide a perfect resolution and are only accurate to within a few feet. They also don't provide full coverage around the world, as anyone who's tried to use location tracking in mountainous areas or dense urban environments will know, and the signals are actually relatively simple to block, which is a constant threat for military use. There is therefore huge demand for improving this system, and the technology has already been developed to do this. Known as GPS-3 and built by Lockheed Martin, the satellites are already being launched and are expected to have fully upgraded the network within a few years. When the project's complete, the signals will be far more precise than now and 8 times stronger, so they can't be blocked, resulting in improved safety, signal integrity, and far more accuracy. Number 2. Direct air capture. As we look to reduce the amount of carbon that's released into the atmosphere to limit the damage that's been caused to the worldwide ecosystem, one approach is to use green energies, but another could be to actively try to remove the carbon that's already there. This is a process called direct air capture and could either produce carbon that can be stored and removed for good, or create what's essentially free carbon fuel, with the theory being that the subsequent use and release of this would have a net zero effect because it's already been in the atmosphere to begin with. Currently, direct air capture techniques are extremely expensive, but as further investment is put into it, the costs have already begun to fall, and experts believe the field could be practical within the next 10 years. There are two main ways that it's done. The first is to use large fans that push through filters that are covered with a liquid solvent, such as sodium hydroxide, and this reacts with the carbon in the air to produce a carbonate that can then be extracted. Another way of doing it has recently been developed and involves building an artificial tree-like structure, which again contains the solvent, but instead relies on the air blowing past it and reacting with it instead of requiring energy to actively push the air through. Various other methods could be possible as well and are actively being explored, and it's hoped that if it becomes viable, direct air capture could well help us undo some of the damage that's already been caused. Number 1. Hydrogen fuel cells. The automotive industry is going through its biggest change in living memory, with virtually every manufacturer trying to develop their own techniques to reduce the reliance on fossil fuels. And while electric and battery concept seems to be the way forward, they certainly aren't a magic bullet. There's concern surrounding the provision of green electricity to all that need it, and the fact that our electrical grids simply aren't designed to handle the loads that would be required. Even if this was sorted out, there's also the fact that batteries are relatively very heavy for the amount of charge that they can hold. And while they may be suitable for cars, they're not yet at a place where they're viable for larger trucks, ships, or planes. That's why another solution is needed, and the most likely candidate is hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen itself can be produced by a range of methods, such as natural gas, nuclear power, biomass, or even other renewable energies. And when it's used, the only byproduct is water. In the UK, a concept train has already been fitted with hydrogen cells and is undergoing tests, while aircraft manufacturers such as Airbus see this as a far more viable target in the near future than full electrification. And car companies too are looking at how it can be used. This technology is approaching the stage where it's possible across a range of applications, and it's only a matter of time until it's commonplace. I'll see you next time.
Watch our future playlist for more top 15 videos about the future. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best future-related videos.